The air was thick with heat and tension at the Air Force Base that afternoon. Mechanics scrambled around a silent F-35 Lightning II that had suddenly gone dead, its engine refusing to respond. Even the senior engineers were baffled. Deadlines were closing in. Brass was growing impatient. And then the janitor stepped forward, old, hunched, and wearing a faded cap that barely hid the scars of time and war. No one paid him much mind. Just another cleaning guy, they thought. But when he quietly rolled up his sleeves and knelt beside the aircraft, something incredible happened. The younger sergeant standing nearby watched in stunned silence as the old man touched the engine, like he had known it all his life. Within minutes, it roared back to life. Not with noise, but with a story long forgotten. What followed next wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Because that janitor wasn't just a janitor. He was a forgotten hero. One of the last surviving legends of a war nobody talks about. And when the base commander found out, the entire base stood still. This is not just a tale of fixing a machine, it's a military tribute to memory, sacrifice, and honor. The base was alive with its usual rhythm: orders shouted, boots stomping, jets howling through the sky, but there was one man who moved like a ghost through it all. He didn't wear a uniform, didn't command respect, and rarely spoke. Most knew him only as Mr. Jennings, the janitor who swept the hangar floors and emptied trash bins without a word. A quiet old man with a limp in his left leg and hands marked with calluses from decades of hard work. He came in early, left late, and seemed invisible to most of the young men and women stationed there. To them, he was just part of the background, someone you didn't really notice unless he got in your way. But to Sergeant Daniel Reyes, Jennings had always seemed different. Reyes, 29, sharp-eyed and proud, was the kind of NCO who took pride in knowing everyone on base. He'd heard rumors from the older techs about Jennings being something else back in the day, but no one knew for sure. The man never spoke about his past, never attended veteran breakfasts, never boasted, just quietly polished aircraft floors and fixed the occasional broken sink. But everything changed on that Wednesday. An F-35 had just returned from a test flight, and, inexplicably, its engine had seized. It wouldn't restart, and the entire diagnostics team was stumped. Tools scattered, wires checked and rechecked, nothing. The sergeant was growing frustrated. The longer the aircraft sat idle, the worse it looked. Every minute of delay was money lost and readiness questioned. That's when Jennings walked by, mop in hand. He paused near the aircraft, eyes lingering on the open panel at the engine bay. There was a flicker in his expression, just a flash of something deep, distant, memories. Then he slowly leaned in, studying a set of wires and tubing like a man reading an old book he once knew by heart. You've got a fuel regulation feedback loop misfiring, Jennings murmured softly. Sergeant Reyes turned, surprised. Excuse me. Jennings nodded, toward a junction deep within the bay. The loop isn't syncing with the digital flow controller. It's minor, but it'll lock the engine every time. That's why it's silent. Reyes blinked, stunned. That wasn't something a janitor should know. On a 5th-gen stealth fighter. How do you know that? Jennings didn't answer directly, he just asked for a wrench. Reyes hesitated, but handed it over. Jennings climbed halfway into the access panel, moved with surprising confidence, and after a few minutes of precise, almost surgical adjustments, climbed back out. Try it now, he said calmly, skeptical but desperate. Reyes signaled the tech to attempt the restart. The engine roared to life. Clean. Perfect. The room went still. Reyes stared at the older man, questions burning in his mind. Sir, who are you? Jennings didn't answer. He just gave a faint smile and returned to his mop. What followed was a stunned silence among the tech crew. Whispers traveled like wildfire. A janitor just outperformed the most advanced diagnostics systems. On base, someone finally asked the question, who is this man? Really? And Reyes couldn't let it go. That evening, after his shift ended, he visited the personnel files. What he found left him speechless. James Jennings, Master Sergeant retired, served 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 in Desert Storm, decorated with a Silver Star, Bronze Star, with Valor, and a Purple Heart. Specialty, Aviation Engineering, Experimental Combat Systems, Honorable Discharge in 1995. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a living legend. Why had no one told them? Why had he never spoken up? The next day, Reyes approached Jennings again, this time with respect in every step. Why are you working here, sir? He asked. Jennings shrugged. I don't want to be saluted. Just wanted to stay close to the birds. They were always quieter than people. Reyes smiled, but there was sadness behind it. Here was a man whose hands had once kept men alive in war, now pushing a mop in silence. In that moment, Reyes knew something had to be done. But what happened next the moment the base commander found out was far beyond anything anyone could have expected. Sergeant Reyes didn't sleep well that night. He kept replaying the moment. Mr. Jennings brought the F-35 engine back to life with his bare hands and a quiet certainty that cut through layers of technology, rank, and forgotten memory. Reyes had served with some sharp minds in the Air Force. But what he saw in Jennings wasn't just intelligence, it was lived experience. The kind that only comes from fixing things in the field, under fire, with lives on the line. The next morning, Reyes stood outside the base commander's office, uncertain how to begin. He knew this could go two ways. Either he'd be dismissed for wasting time, or Jennings would finally get the honor he deserved. Colonel Walter Granger, a by-the-book man with 25 years of service and a chest full of ribbons, looked up from his paperwork as Reyes stepped in. "Sir, request permission to speak about a matter that requires immediate attention," Reyes began, his tone sharper than usual. Granger arched a brow. "Is this about the F-35 incident yesterday?" "Yes, sir, but it's not about the aircraft. It's about the man who fixed it, the janitor." The word hung heavy in the room. Granger leaned back. "What about him?" Reyes took a breath and handed over the personnel file he'd printed from archives. "His name is James Jennings, former Master Sergeant. Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. This man isn't just a janitor, he's a war hero." Granger skimmed the file, and for a moment, his stern expression faltered. "This can't be real." "It is, sir. He served in units that don't even exist anymore. Ran repair ops under live fire in Da Nang. Was embedded in special aviation programs during Desert Storm. He didn't just serve, sir, he saved lives, fixed birds that brought our men home. And now he's pushing a mop, because no one remembers." The room grew still. Granger stood and walked to the window, watching jets slice through the morning sky. "When I took command of this base, I thought I knew every veteran who walked through these gates. How did this one slip through the cracks?" Reyes stepped forward, because he wanted it that way. He didn't ask for recognition. He just stayed close to the aircraft. That's all he ever wanted. There was a long pause. Then Granger turned resolute. "Where is he now?" That afternoon, the base paused its operations. Jets were grounded. Drills were delayed. A rare silence settled over the hangar as the base commander himself made his way through the rows of aircraft, flanked by Reyes and a few senior officers. They found Jennings, as expected, quietly mopping the corner of Hangar 3. He didn't look up until the commander's shadow stretched across the floor in front of him. "Double quotes, Mr. Jennings," Granger said, voice steady but respectful. The janitor looked up, surprised. Sir Granger extended his hand. "Master Sergeant James Jennings. It's an honor." For a moment, Jennings didn't move. Then he slowly shook the commander's hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were guarded. "You've been cleaning these floors for 15 years, Granger continued. "And not once did you tell us who you really were." "Why?" Jennings sighed. "Because medals don't fix engines. I didn't want to be saluted. I wanted to work." A hush fell over the group. Jennings went back to mopping, but Granger gently placed a hand on his arm. "We're not here to salute. We're here to recognize." Granger turned to Reyes. "Gather the squadron, all of them." Within an hour, over 300 airmen and women stood in formation outside Hangar 3. Many were confused. Others had heard whispers, but no one expected what came next. Granger stepped forward and spoke into the loudspeaker. "Today, we pause for a different kind of briefing," he said. "We're here not to train or drill, but to honor. Because among us stands a man who has lived 100 untold stories. A man who once rebuilt a gunship under enemy fire while bullets chewed through the wings. A man who held the lives of our pilots in his hands and saved them." He turned toward Jennings, who stood quietly off to the side, cap in hand. "Master Sergeant Jennings, you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. And from this day forward, every man and woman on this base will know your name." Then, Granger did something no one had ever seen before. He saluted first, and in perfect unison, 300 airmen snapped into salute. Jennings stood frozen, eyes wide. Slowly, his shoulders straightened not from pride, but from the weight of memories he had carried alone for decades. His lips trembled. His hand rose, returning the salute with a quiet grace only real war heroes possess. Tears glistened in the eyes of even the toughest tech sergeants. This wasn't just a military tribute, it was a reckoning. That evening, Jennings sat in the mess hall for the first time in years, not as a janitor, but as a guest of honor. Veterans from around the base came forward with their own stories, thanking him for the invisible work he had done, for every aircraft he repaired, every forgotten act of battlefield courage that no one ever recorded. And when someone asked what his proudest moment was, Jennings simply said, "That I'm still here. So I can remind you all that not every hero wears their rank." Word of what happened at Hangar 3 spread beyond the base walls like wildfire. By the next morning, the Department of Veterans Affairs had contacted Colonel Granger. The base's public affairs officer was flooded with calls from local news, military history podcasts, and even a retired general who once served with Jennings in the Gulf. Somehow, after decades of silence, a forgotten hero's legacy was waking from the shadows. But Master Sergeant James Jennings didn't seek the spotlight. He went right back to work, still showed up before dawn, still mopped the same hangar floors, still polished the tool racks, with care. The only difference now was how people looked at him. No longer invisible, Jennings was now a quiet legend walking among them. Young mechanics would pause their work just to ask, "How did you keep birds in the air with so little back then? Or is it true you once rebuilt a Chinook rotor with scavenged parts under mortar fire?" He never bragged. But if someone asked with sincerity, he would smile and share just enough. He didn't want admiration. He wanted them to care about the aircraft, about the mission, about the sacrifice behind every flight. That week, a young airman named Private Luis Tanner approached Jennings after hours. He had been struggling with his training, overwhelmed by the complexity of modern systems. He looked lost. Jennings saw it in his eyes immediately. He'd seen it in Vietnam too, in boys who went to war before they became men. Mr. Jennings, how did you ever make it through all this?" Tanner asked, voice low, shoulders slumped. Jennings sat beside him on a bench near the tarmac. "I didn't," he replied softly. "Not all of me, but the part that kept going. That part listened, watched, stayed calm. You'll make it. Just stop trying to be perfect. Start trying to understand." Tanner nodded, a lump forming in his throat. This was more than advice. It was mentorship. It was passing the flame. A few days later, the base commander held a small but powerful ceremony in the operations center. Reyes and the commander had worked behind the scenes to get it approved. A dedicated plaque was installed near the entrance of Hangar 3. It read, "In honor of Master Sergeant James Jennings, unsung hero, aircraft whisperer, your hands built freedom. Your silence taught humility." Below it, etched into the steel, was his service number and a single quote from Jennings himself. "I didn't fix planes. I brought men home." When they unveiled the plaque, Jennings stood silently before it. He touched the metal, not with pride but with reverence. His fingers trembled. Behind him, dozens of airmen stood in formation, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to be there. They wanted to witness something real, something that mattered. One of the pilots, Captain Harper, stepped forward. "Sir, my father flew with the 33rd during Desert Storm. He always told me someone named Jennings saved his tail rotor in a sandstorm. I never believed him. Until now. Thank you for saving my dad." Jennings looked at her and nodded, eyes wet but unwavering. He made it back. That's all that counts. But even amidst the recognition, there was one thing left unfinished. Reyes had discovered, buried in an old VA case, that Jennings had been nominated for the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration, after an incident in 1971. A secret mission had gone wrong in Cambodia. Jennings had risked his life to recover a downed pilot, rebuilt a portable comms tower under fire, and got the team extracted. The recommendation had been lost during a transfer of command. Reyes took it personally. He contacted the Air Force Records Division, spoke to a retired colonel who served with Jennings, dug up declassified papers. The deeper he went, the clearer it became. Jennings had earned that medal, and it had slipped through bureaucratic cracks. And now, Reyes had a mission of his own to make it right. He worked day and night, building the case. His report was sent up the chain. 2 weeks later, the Air Force confirmed the award had been reapproved. The ceremony was scheduled quietly. Just Jennings, Reyes, Colonel Granger, and a few close friends. No cameras, no speeches, just reverence. The moment the medal was pinned to his chest, Jennings closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking of glory. He was remembering the men he served with, the ones who never came home, the ones who never got a medal, the ones who died in jungles and deserts, their names fading into time. Reyes noticed him staring off into the sky and asked gently, "Where did you go just now, sir?" Jennings answered, voice barely audible, "Back to the sand, back to the jungle. I still see their faces, you know." Reyes placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now they see yours. And the world finally does too." In that moment, Jennings wasn't a janitor. He wasn't just a veteran. He was the embodiment of battlefield courage, soldier sacrifice, and everything that makes a real war hero. He was what this country sometimes forgets to remember. An unsung hero whose silence spoke louder than any trumpet. Life slowly returned to its routine. On base. Jets thundered once again across the skies. Drills resumed, and orders were barked as usual. But something had changed in the air settle, yet unmistakable. Every young airman who crossed Hangar 3 did so with a little more respect. Not because they were told to, but because they had seen what true service looked like. Master Sergeant Jennings, however, remained as humble as ever. He still reported at sunrise, still pushed his mop, still treated every aircraft like a sacred trust. But now, the eyes that once passed over him with indifference now carried recognition, even reverence. He wasn't just part of the base anymore, he was its heart. Then, one cool October morning, Jennings didn't show up. Not by 600, not by 0800 Sergeant. Reyes knew something was wrong. He called Jennings' modest apartment off base. No answer. He rushed over and found him peacefully seated in his recliner, cap in hand, with a faded photo of his old squad resting on his chest. Master Sergeant James Jennings had passed away in his sleep. He was 84. The news hit the base like a thunderclap. An email went out. Operations were suspended. Silence fell across the runway. And just like that, a man who had been invisible for decades became impossible to forget. The military tribute that followed was unlike anything the base had ever seen. A missing man. Formation soared over the airfield as hundreds stood in silence. The flag over Hangar 3 was lowered and folded with military precision. And in the center of the ceremony stood a display. His mop, his old tool belt, and the same faded cap he wore every day. Colonel Granger addressed the crowd with a voice heavy with emotion. Some men wear stars, some wear stripes. Jennings wore none. But he carried this base on his shoulders. He fixed the machines that flew our freedom. He mentored our young without asking for thanks. And he reminded us what it means to serve even when no one's looking. As taps played, tears flowed freely from young privates to hardened commanders. But it didn't end there. Reyes had one final request, to name the newly refurbished Hangar 3 in Jennings' honor. The petition was approved in record time. 2 months later, a brand new sign was unveiled at the entrance of the hangar. The James Jennings Memorial Hangar, in honor of a forgotten hero who never asked to be remembered. And beneath it, engraved in steel, "He brought men home." Years passed. Trainees came and went. Commanders rotated. Technology evolved. But every class of airmen that stepped foot in Jennings' hangar was told his story. They learned that real war heroes don't always stand on stages. That unsung heroes walk among us, unseen but essential. That inspirational military figures aren't just names in history books, they're sometimes the ones holding a mop. Watching, waiting, ready to help when it matters most. And every veteran's day, without fail. Sergeant Reyes, now a chief, stood at the hangar door and saluted the empty spot where Jennings used to work. He would whisper, "We remember, Master Sergeant, always." Because soldier sacrifice isn't measured in medals or parades. It's measured in quiet acts of courage, in the willingness to keep showing up even when no one's watching. That was Jennings' legacy. A real war hero. A man of emotional storytelling, without ever speaking much. And, above all, a forgotten hero, who finally came home in the hearts of those he inspired.